Hello and welcome to another episode of ZenChats. Today is honestly a very special episode. I chat with Jon Rogers, who was the ex-head of franchise development at Disney. I don't need to tell you how awesome that is, to have an opportunity to talk with someone who has such experience in world building, brand building. He also worked at Lucasfilms, on the Star Wars franchise. Just has so much experience in brands, marketing, world building, and has been spending a lot more time over the last year in the NFT space. And yeah, we chat about what some of these NFT projects could be doing better. Some examples of projects that are doing things really, really well from a branding and franchise perspective. Building out these worlds and universes. Jon has some great ideas about building an NFT project from the ground up, some great ideas on intellectual property rights and licensing rights. I think that it's such a new area in the space that we just haven't seen a lot. And I think we're going to see over the next few years, more and more what works, what didn't work, and how this whole entire industry is evolving. It's so brand new and it's so fascinating, and there's so much to think about. And I think, yeah, we touch on a bunch of stuff in this talk, and I hope to have Jon back on again because I could have chatted with him for hours and hours and hours. But hope you enjoy. If you do, like, comment, subscribe, really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Hello, Jon. Nice to connect with you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Nice to see you again,
Yeah,
and
face to face.
nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'm so excited for this conversation. I was telling you just before we jumped on air that I first, I guess, heard about you and your background through the Overpriced JPEGs podcast, where you had a conversation with Kylie Riley, and it was really fascinating and opened my eyes to this whole new world of storytelling, brand building, franchise building that has sort of been happening a bit. It's definitely been happening in the NFT space, but I'd never really consciously thought of it until you sort of put those words out there, and I started thinking. Honestly, I haven't been able to get it out of my head. I've sort of been reframing the entire space through this lens of projects being brands, and the most powerful ones building worlds that create an emotional connection to people. But anyway, that's just, yeah, my background on how I came to find out about you. But I think it would be helpful if you can run through a bit about your background, your sort of work experience, and then how you found yourself in this NFT world.
Sure. I think what most of the audience would be interested in is kind of what I've done in the last, say, 20 years. God, I'm dating myself now. Definitely boomer. So, in the last, for about 12, 15 years, I worked in the entertainment industry. Started off as a consultant to Lucasfilm at an agency called Science and Fiction. And one day, the head of marketing at Lucasfilm called me up and asked if I wanted to take a position on the Star Wars marketing team. My answer was, how quickly do I need to get there, and how much of a pay cut do I have to take?
Yeah,
And
amazing.
but it was an amazing opportunity to become a brand marketer for the Star Wars brand, and I did that for a number of years. And when my contract expired, the head of marketing, coincidentally at Disney, called me up and asked if I wanted to start a brand new function at Disney. And so I became the founding executive of the franchise management, or now known as franchise development function at Disney, and did that for about 10 years before my wife and I decided to move to Oregon and have a bit of a life change, start a family, do a few other things in our careers. And I've been in Oregon for 6 or 7 years now as the chief marketing officer at a brewery called Ninkasi Brewing Company. Had a little boutique consulting firm called Global Headquarters with two of my ex-colleagues from Disney who are now back at Lucasfilm working on Mandalorian. And in the last year, though, what's really gotten interesting is I've been pulled into the NFT space, blockchain space, just through a series of consulting projects, and each one has progressively taken me deeper down into the rabbit hole. And I'm kind of now at a point where I'm making a hard pivot full time into the NFT blockchain world. And what I see here is just an amazing opportunity that what I believe that we're seeing the emergence of a brand new media platform. So think like you're looking over Marconi's shoulder at the invention of the radio, or you're looking over the Lumiere brothers at the very first film ever made. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And I'm just excited to be a part of that.
It is so exciting, honestly. I think more and more people, yeah, find themselves falling down this rabbit hole, and it's very consuming, but it's very exciting. There's this tweet that was going around a couple of weeks ago about how everyone's leaving their 9 to 5 jobs to go 24/7 in Web3 because it is 24/7. It's
Yeah,
relentless.
the pace is
But
lightning. It's just it's the pace is definitely tough.
yeah, it's insane. I've heard like literal CEOs of big companies say they can't keep up because it's that much more crazy than even traditional like tech startups and all sorts of stuff. It's something
Yeah,
else.
but that's actually a great opportunity for people is if you can find yourself in a position where you can be that translator or that conduit between the space
Mm,
and the old media companies, the old businesses, you
yeah.
might find there's a nice opportunity there because certainly executives at these old line businesses will never keep up and they're going to need talent to help them keep pace with the industry and help translate would be my word. And so I think there's going to be great
Yeah.
opportunities.
I was actually chatting with someone earlier today who's basically found himself in that exact role. He's not like a massive expert in Web3 and crypto and NFTs, but he's been in the space for a few months and he has connections to some, very large brands and they want to enter the space and they just basically use him as their sounding board as like, if we want to do this, is that a cash grab? Is the community going to like that? How should we do? And like, if you're in the space for a few months, you get a feel for like what flies and what doesn't. Like there's this whole
Mhm.
ethos in Web3 that it's like a culture that you can't really understand from the outside without having someone on the inside. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right there.
Yeah, along those lines, actually, I have a call on Monday where a toy company that has a TV show coming with Apple TV later this year might want to hire me as a consultant. In fact, I think they are going to hire me as a consultant because they need that translator. Like they
Mm,
want to enter the space, they want to do it the right way. They know that they don't know enough to do it themselves, and so like that's might consume up like half of my time, consulting time, is that new project doing that
yeah.
very thing.
I want to go back to sort of your role at Disney because that sounded very
Yeah.
interesting. It was franchise. What was the exact role again?
Started as franchise management. Think like brand management, but it's brand management for Pirates of the Caribbean or Tron, rather
Right.
than brand management for Mickey Mouse or Walt
Hmm.
Disney Company. And it started off that way and became franchise development. And it's just a change of word, really, but it is a subtle distinction in how our role changed at the company over
Hmm.
that decade.
So would you be sort of responsible for a particular franchise like Pirates of the Caribbean, or just
Yep.
sort of overseeing all of the different ones?
Yeah, the way it started when I first joined, I was the founding executive. I was the first person hired on the team, and then built the team underneath me from there. And at the start, it was everything live action and animation. And this is, of course, before Marvel or Lucasfilm were a part of Disney. So I worked on animated titles like Cars, Toy Story. Um, Incredibles was before my time. I'm trying to think of some others. Little Chicken Little, if anyone remembers Chicken Little, that was one of
Yeah,
mine
yeah, I remember.
on the animation side. On live action side, Pirates of the Caribbean was definitely the big one. That was
Mm,
the biggest of the properties I managed. Tron was one of my titles. So did both. Chronicles and Art is another one. So live action animation. Then after 2 years, animation split off, and the reason for that is that we had acquired Pixar. And
mm,
when we acquired Pixar, John Lasseter wanted franchise to report directly to him. So we essentially cleaved the franchise function into two. One part was live action and stayed with me, and then the animation group went over to report to John. And the main thing that allowed us to do is to actually focus more on the live action side and build more resources, which was actually a great thing in hindsight because it allowed us to kind of develop more expertise and not be as pulled into two different worlds. One thing that a lot of people might not know is that the way that production works in live action is much different than animation. And so the processes, the timelines are much different. The same expertise and skill sets are required, but it's a much different timeline. And so it was helpful to build tool sets and analytics that focused on both separately. But eventually, what happened is they brought animation back. John got
oh.
overcommitted. he has he has a tendency to overcommit himself and just want to take on everything because he just loves it
Yeah.
so much. He's like the ultimate geek, Star Wars, Disney geek, Star Wars
Yeah.
geek too. And he got overcommitted, and they eventually brought animation back 2 years later with a whole separate team that was sat side by side with mine. So
That's
that's kind of a
that's
little bit of the
fascinating.
history.
Yeah. I'd love to sort of dig in a little more in terms of like what your like day to day, week to week responsibilities, roles, what you're actually doing in terms of franchise management and development. So, like, what sort of things did you look out for, try to do? Yeah. What
Yeah,
really
yeah,
was this job? Yeah.
It'd be helpful to give you a little bit of the history of how the team
Mm.
was. They even decided to create the team because a
Yeah.
brand new function being invented from scratch doesn't really happen very often. In fact,
No.
this will come into later in our conversation with Mike White and Disney's NFT announcement or
Mm.
Metaverse announcement, because this is the only second time I'm aware of that happening. So the reason what it happened is Michael Eisner was the CEO of Disney in 2004, 2005, announced his retirement a year in advance. They'd announced a year in advance that Bob Iger would become the CEO. So they handled that executive transition very well and had a long-term plan on how that would roll in. So Iger had a year to really travel the world, to go meet with all of the key partners, to just hear what the feedback was, and every meeting went the same. We love you. You're the best company to ever work with. Disney's the best. And he walked
Yeah.
out every meeting like these people are lying to me. And he
Yeah.
went to Walmart. The story I heard was that he went to Walmart, meant to meet the CEO of Walmart, and the CEO, without his knowledge, took him into a meeting with their 30 or 40 top buyers. And it turned into an hour-long gripe fest of, you're the worst partner we work with. We would kick you out of our stores if we could, but our customers won't let us. And he walked out of that meeting essentially, finally, someone's telling me the truth.
Yeah. That's
and what
incredible.
and what they learned was that from those meetings is that there was no alignment. So if a
Mm.
team from, say, consumer products was going into Walmart to pitch Pirates of the Caribbean, they would pitch it one way. The theatrical promotions team would pitch it a different way. Home entertainment would pitch it a different way. So every
Mm.
team spun it their own unique way. And what the partner saw on the other side was a very disjointed, is Pirates a drunken rum fest? Is it a
Yeah.
family friendly romp across the oceans? And they didn't know what they were getting. And so my team
Mm.
was created to bring alignment across the entire Walt Disney Company. And that was the key word. We weren't forcing our partners in all the other divisions and territories to do what they had to do. It was just to do a lot of the early thinking around the brand, set a long-term brand plan in place of how we wanted to grow it. And more importantly, with Disney, is what not to do. Disney has a luxury of having so many opportunities that it's more important to say what we're not going to do than what we are going to do. So we did a lot of work around that, do all
Mhm.
the brand equity research. And so we set those strategies in place, those processes in place, and created a lot of communication structure and broke down silos. It seems very simple to say, well, we're going to break down silos with communication. In a company like Disney, it's a lot easier said than done, but we accomplished an awful lot in that regard over the years. And then really just manage these properties and manage the cycles. We would work with filmmakers very early. In some cases, I was the first person that a filmmaker would meet with.
Wow.
If you remember the Tomorrowland movie with starred George Clooney, didn't quite work out. But when Damon Lindelof came in to pitch the title for the very first time, the two people in the meeting were myself and Sean Bailey, who's the head of production at Disney, because he asked that my team be at the table for that pitch. And that was a great, I think, a recognition of what we had accomplished. That
Mm.
he had seen that we were key partner for him to being successful with this pitch and this idea and as a potential franchise. But eventually, we just build these processes out, and then the tools that were necessary to see success, and then we'd manage the titles long term.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Um, it makes total sense as well when you explain like what it was like beforehand and the need for this consistency across, the entire
Yeah,
spectrum. Yeah,
yeah. And the reason why I was brought in, I'll give you more of the history if it's interesting, is that
of course. Yeah.
what Disney wanted was the Lucasfilm playbook. They looked around at the market and saw that the only studio or team that really managed live action franchises very well was Lucasfilm with the Star Wars brand. And they tried at
Mm.
the end of this last Star Wars movie, they wanted to hire Lucasfilm people, Star Wars people. So they ended up hiring three of us to come to Disney right after that last Star Wars movie and bring the playbook. Now, it's interesting
Yeah.
in that history of that playbook, for if anyone's really a fan, a film geek, or say a marketing geek in that regard, the Lucasfilm playbook was written by a man named Jim Ward, who was the head of marketing there, and he had been the head of Wyden and Kennedy, overseeing the Nike account. He's the guy behind the Mars Blackman, Michael Jordan campaign that they did with Spike Lee, if you remember that classic campaign. And so the Lucasfilm playbook was really the Nike playbook that Wyden and Kennedy
Interesting.
had developed. So you kind of weird how you go full circle where Nike and Wyden and Kennedy invent this marketing playbook. Lucasfilm steals it for Star Wars. Disney steals it for their projects. Disney acquires Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
And it
Now
kind
they
of
just need
goes
to
full
acquire
cycle.
Nike, and then we're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Which
I
in
don't think
turn
that's going
brings
to
me to
happen.
the metaverse, because Nike has acquired Artifact. So
Yep. Yeah.
that's really full circle. I think let's bring it back to, I think, NFTs and Web3 a little bit. A lot of the projects we've seen over the last, say, 10 to 12 months, they're like PFP, Avatar, 10K projects, and for a long time, most people, myself included, thought that these were just like profile pictures that people can use to have like an identity on the internet and then be part of the club. And that was kind of it. And it was like, all right, cool. You get to hang out in Discord and chat with people. But as time's gone on, it's very clear that these are becoming these brands, franchises. And usually, like the most successful ones, it seems very intentionally. Like Yuga Labs has, done a lot to push forward the Bored Ape Yacht Club brand,
Mhm.
for instance. Cool Cats, they're very family friendly, and again, they're conscious of their brand, which again is not something I was really cognizant of until I heard that interview with you and Carly. But it's very clear and apparent that the most successful projects tend to be the ones where these brands are built. What do you sort of see as things that these projects are doing right and that they maybe could be doing better and learn from all of this experience, decades in traditional media?
Yeah, I think first the things that they're doing right is they're having a long-term perspective, that they're building something. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have every single step mapped out years in advance, but they have a long-term perspective that they want to build something big. And by I mean by big, it's something big in the NFT space, but it's also something bigger in possibly other applications. It could be publishing, it could be film or television. It could be other things, but it's just they have a bigger idea that they want to see this brand out and permeate pop culture. And that might be the best way to think of it, that they see it permeating culture beyond the NFT space. And I think taking that long-term perspective is very smart, and putting in place, with obviously certain limitations, whatever plans you can to plan for that and think about that long term. It's obviously with the pace of lightning in this industry,
Yeah.
it's going to change. I mean, Pirates of the Caribbean, our plan for that property changed every week, and that was at the pace of an industry that was invented in the late 1800s, early
Yeah.
1900s. So think about the pace of how these plans are going to change. But having a tool or something to refer to as a guide or as a light, kind of a shining light on the horizon that you're building towards, and knowing that it's going to change a lot along the way, but having that plan and that perspective is really helpful. And I want to say, not every property needs to feel that they have to build a brand. Some could be,
Mm,
we're going to publish some NFT PFPs. We're going to engage a community in that regard. We're not going to put storytelling around it, and that's perfectly
yeah.
fine too. There'll just
Yeah.
be some artificial limitations perhaps when they do that, and
Yeah.
that might be by
Yeah.
design.
Yeah. I mean, NFTs come in all sorts and
Mhm.
all flavors and colors. And um, let's use the Bored Ape Yacht Club example, because it's obviously probably the most well-known, prolific. There is a brand. It's very clear that they've branched out. There's merch. There's video games now, and not just the Yuga Labs themselves developing these things, but because they gave sort of full commercial rights to the owners of these NFTs, they're now going off. People are going off and creating. There's a coffee brand. I think there might be a couple of coffee branded Bored
Mhm.
Ape things. There's Jenkins of LA doing this whole separate entity, with storytelling and licensing apes for other purposes. Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that is diluting the brand, either in the short term, or it's going to happen in the long term? Or do you think it's sort of this explosion of creativity giving the power to the collectors to do whatever they want?
Yeah, it's first of all, I'm a fan of the Apes project. I'm not a holder of one, sadly. I had an opportunity and I did not do it, and so I'm kicking myself for that.
Yeah.
That was my early days in the NFT space. I'm a fan of the Apes project in general. I have some concerns about what's going to happen, say, a year from now, 18 months from now, when a lot of these big projects come to market. For instance, what happens if there's two competing albums coming to market or two TV shows coming to market at the same time? What will eventually happen is, if traditional media follows its usual path, is that one will blink and one will not. And so one
Yeah.
project will say, that's it, we're canceled. And so you're going to have some disappointed ape holders if they're the ones that have those canceled projects. You're going to have some excited holders if they're the ones that the competition just
Yeah.
just shut down.
Yeah.
I really like what Jenkins the Valet is doing in terms of they're kind of saying, okay, we're going to build this side brand around this one ape, and we're going to keep it. We're part of Bored Apes, but we're going to keep it arm's length. We're going to build our own
Mm.
extension on the world over here. And what they're doing by that is being able to build that fence or that moat around what they're going to develop. And I think
Mm.
they may have a little bit more success in that regard because they are building that moat around their world. It is also a little bit less inclusive, I guess you could say, or less open because of that. But it's
Mhm.
I think that might lead to more success when all these other ape projects are coming to market at the same time.
Yeah. It's a very good point. I think, yeah, like even in the first few months of the Bored Ape Yacht Club existence, like April, May, June last year, um, I noticed and I saw lots of people like were really excited about creating things with their ape at the center of it. And fast forward to now, there were tons of ideas then. A lot of them have not really eventuated into anything, and I think people tried it and it just fizzled out. Maybe again, I remember there was this mania phase when people were like, let's create banana projects because everyone has an ape, everyone's going to want a banana. And there were like 8 to 10 banana projects all
Mhm.
coming out at the same time. And none of them are around now because, like, again, if there was this coordinated vision and group and one entity said, all right, let's with our powers combined, we'll focus, we'll do this banana project. It's very affiliated with the Bored Apes, maybe not officially, but like the holders come together and then we rally behind it and all of the apes support it. I think that would have succeeded, but because we had 8 to 10 projects, none of them succeeded.
Yeah, I've spoken in the past about like there's a piece missing right now of okay, you want to. I understand and I appreciate, and I'm a fan of the idea of decentralization. That okay, here's a license that gives you a lot of rights. You can do an awful lot with this license, but is it healthy for the community, to say the 10,000 holders, to fight with one another for access to market opportunities?
Mm,
Is that going to eventually do more damage than good? And so that piece that's missing is how do you respect decentralization, but I'll still have some sort of strategic coordination among the projects. And I've kind of talked about that maybe there's a DAO there that, okay, every ape comes with a token that's a membership in a DAO. And the DAO can decide if there's two competing projects for an album deal, who gets the album deal?
mm,
Do you just let it fight it in the marketplace with the consumer, or does the DAO get to have a say? Well, this is the better project for the overall brand long term. And that's
yeah.
the piece that's missing that I'm kind of interested in seeing how it's going to develop and who's going to build that.
Yeah. Did you happen to see the interview with Nicole Muniz, the CEO of Yuga Labs, a week ago or so?
I saw parts of it. I clipped through it, so I'm aware
Yeah.
of the interview. Yeah.
Yeah, so she was talking about how the Bored Ape Yacht Club is one part of Yuga Labs, obviously, and
Mhm.
Yuga Labs is interested in growing the brand in many directions. And I think I can't remember if she said it in the interview actually, or this was a previous Twitter thread, but I think they were talking about how the end goal for the Bored Ape Yacht Club entity is for that to be fully decentralized, as in a DAO running
Yeah.
it all, but Yuga Labs itself will remain a centralized entity. Um,
Yeah, and that makes
any
perfect
thought? Yeah,
sense. Yeah,
yeah,
and I like that idea that eventually the Yuga Labs as the creator, the creating entity, will hand it over to the community. But
mm,
Yuga Labs as a creating entity, it's called a studio. It's a modern day NFT studio. They'll have
mm.
other projects that they bring to market. Board llamas. I love to use llamas examples. I get called out for this quite a bit on Twitter. But yeah, so board llamas. So
I'm
you
surprised
know,
no one's created the board llamas yet. Maybe they have actually.
I'm going to trademark that immediately after our
Yeah,
call here. Yeah. But maybe their next project, whatever that is, it'll be, they're going to continue to produce and be creative. And I think that's an amazing opportunity
yeah,
to be that kind of creative studio and
yeah,
launch
yeah.
brands, hand them over to their community and go to the
Yeah,
next one.
yeah. It's fascinating. I think.
One of the things on apes, if we can keep talking about that for a minute, one of the things on apes that with the way they handled the license, and I've mentioned this to a number of projects, and I get eye rolls or the same response. I'll tell you what that is in a second. But one thing that wasn't considered is restricted categories. Now, in traditional
I was just going to bring
licensing,
this up because there was
yeah,
this tweet you made about that. Yeah.
yeah. So in traditional licensing, let's say Marvel licensed the Hulk character. There's restricted
Mm,
categories, which means we're going to license T-shirts and toys and comic books, but we're not going to do this. And what this is usually a pretty well-established list of categories: alcohol, gambling, tobacco, undergarments like diapers,
Yeah.
firearms. Now, no
Mm.
project has ever launched that I'm aware of in the space with a restricted categories list.
Mm.
So you apply this to apes. How does the community respond when the first Bored Ape shotgun is created or the first Bored Ape diapers is created? Now,
Yeah.
alcohol's been done, and alcohol feels okay. Like, okay, Bored Ape
Right.
beers out there, Bored Ape scotch or bourbon feels okay with that brand.
Yeah.
For the Woody's brand, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. But gambling, okay, Bored Ape pachinko machine or roulette table, sure, I could
Mm.
see that. In fact, I could see
Yeah.
like a gambling lounge like themed around
Yeah.
Bored Apes. That feels right. So anyhow, what I'm saying is that these brands need to think about, where do they want to have restricted categories, or do they want to
Mm.
just let the market decide? My preference and what I've recommended to several projects is that you need to think about this, and I think you don't want diapers and toilet paper or
Yeah.
firearms. And what
Yeah.
I get, the answer I've gotten twice now is, that sounds like big corporate legalese, and we don't want that.
Mm.
We don't want to look big corporate legalese. Like, I
Yeah.
appreciate that, but when you see your X brand diapers come out, don't scream like, "Why
Yeah.
did you do that?"
Yeah. It's an interesting conundrum. It's sort of like the way things have been for forever. Like, and it's also like these things are considered taboo, I guess, or like edgy, or not family friendly, whatever you might want to call it. And is that because of like because they were that way at a certain point, and all the brands decided we'll make these restricted, and so it never became mainstream, or for some other reason? And yeah, I mean, I definitely understand it, but I agree. I think with that sort of that Web3 mindset of, we don't want to be corporate, we don't want to control what people can do. But you're right, it's gonna lead to some really sticky situations. Like, as soon as you said a Bored Ape shotgun, like a chill went down my spine. I was like, that's confronting. Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, I could see Bored Ape alcohol or Bored Ape gambling equipment,
Mm,
play games. Bored Ape shotgun, that just feels bad for everyone. Like,
mm,
that doesn't feel right. I can't think of I can't think of any brands right now in the NFT space. I would say firearms would be okay,
yeah.
and that, by the way, might be a very uniquely American
Yeah.
problem with
Yeah.
firearms, given
But,
our
I mean, the
culture there.
market is 30-40% US based, so
Yeah.
it's an everyone's problem, yeah.
What will probably end up happening is that somewhere along the line, someone will do something, and everyone in the community will say, "No, we don't want that." And
Yeah.
then this idea of legalese that's big corporate will begin to seep in a little bit of, okay,
Mm,
we're not going to want that to happen.
yeah. It'll be like community,
Yeah,
policing it or something, like,
yeah,
which
or
is
maybe
probably how
it's
it should be, yeah.
and maybe it's that DAO idea. Maybe there is a
Yeah.
DAO that says, okay, new categories. The DAO needs to vote, and the DAO can say, okay, we think that that's okay.
You mentioned Woodies just before.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of them as well. I know that you are. That they're like, again, a more family friendly project, really focused on the lore and the world building and storytelling. Is that the reason you're so attracted to them, because they are focused on storytelling, world building, or is there something else that they have done, perhaps with their licenses, or with their branding, that is different to other projects?
There's a couple of pieces to it, why I'm a fan of Woody's. First is they've got that long-term approach to, we want to build something. It starts with NFTs, and NFTs will be our home base, but we want to build something and grow it beyond that. That they have a focus on deep lore or mythology. Actually, we should talk about the distinction between lore and mythology. It's actually really interesting in
I
this
would love
space.
to get into that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll hold that for a minute. They have that long-term approach to building a world, and with spin-off storytelling opportunities. Um, I also like that it's a family-friendly, what I would call family friendly. And what I think is an opportunity that is going to emerge more and more in the space is family friendly NFT content and storytelling content. Something that you can do. Like, I have a 6-year-old daughter, so I love sitting with her and looking through. She's an aspiring artist. Her name is Matisse. We've named her after.
Wow.
We set a high bar for her, naming her
Yes.
after Matisse. So my daughter Matisse, I love sitting with her and looking at art, and she loves art and telling me what she likes. I've set up a wallet for her, and I'll purchase NFTs and send them to her wallet, and hopefully they'll be pay for her college education someday,
Yeah.
or just be something she loves and remembers, and as a family activity. And so and this might be part of my Disney background coming in. I just love the idea of family oriented activities and content and storytelling. And I think Woody's fit that perfectly well. And
Mm.
long term, maybe not this year, but long term, I think that's going to be a huge and growing part of the NFT market, are these family oriented activities. And for myself, that's actually where I intend to focus most of my attention.
Mm. It makes total sense as I guess as this all goes more mainstream and the world gets involved. We've seen that it seems like family-friendly brands are the biggest ones because everyone can enjoy them. Like they're not just because they're family-friendly doesn't mean adults can't enjoy them.
Mhm.
And but if it is adult only, then kids can't really. So yeah, it sort of captures the whole market in a more friendly, universally appealing way. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, but what's great
Yeah.
about the space is that there's room for everyone. There's room for
Mhm.
every kind of story and creative, and
Yeah.
yeah, this is just a space that's a little slower to develop, but I think is going to be growing in the future.
Yeah. Absolutely. I want to bring up a tweet that you made. What was it? Disney taps Mike White to lead Metaverse strategy. So,
Mhm.
can you talk about this announcement? It was, I think, a week or so ago. Um, this seems like a big deal. Disney appoints someone to lead Metaverse strategy. We've always, like, a lot of people have been saying, wait till Disney gets into NFTs. Wait till there's Marvel and Star Wars NFTs. Wait, that's going to be huge. And we've seen a bit of it, like on the VV app, but it's not really been mainstream yet. But this seems like, yeah. Can you just talk a bit about this position?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here, and I was really surprised. It kind of flew under the radar. Maybe the timing of it wasn't quite right, or
Mm,
just it just didn't quite get picked up the way I thought it would. And what's interesting with that is that several weeks earlier, they had posted a job posting for a manager level consumer products licensing person who would have NFTs in their responsibilities.
hmm.
And it blew up. Everyone was talking about this one sort of very niche
Yeah,
position. And then they announced this SVP level head of metaverse, and it just was crickets. So
that was so crazy.
we picked up on the wrong signals in terms of how the community responded to this.
Yeah.
Now, why is this important? It's important for a number of really good reasons. The first is that Mike White is being given a corporate enterprise wide global mandate. So, this is the one person who will presumably build a team underneath him who will oversee everything Disney does in the metaverse. Now, it doesn't mean just like my franchise team, doesn't mean that he's going to be the hard yes or hard no on you can do this, but he's going to set the strategy. He's going to oversee where do we want to focus as a brand? What are we not going to do? Probably even more important, what are we not going to do as a brand in the
Hmm.
space? And so he's got that mandate. The second important part about it is that this announcement came directly from the CEO, Bob Chapek. Now, Bob Chapek, the CEO traditionally at Disney, never really sends all hands, all companies memos like this very often, maybe 3 or 4 a year, usually tied to an earnings announcement or an earnings statement or something that happened with a press release, never about an executive appointment. In fact, I can't remember maybe once that Iger sent an announcement about an executive appointment.
Wow.
So we should take away from this a very important read that this is at the CEO level and everyone in the company, so all hundred some thousand employees, have been given a directive. This is the guy who will oversee us in this space. So we shouldn't underestimate how important that was. A couple other
Yeah.
takeaways from this is that Mike will be based in Burbank at the corporate headquarters building, which is called the Team Disney building. You might see classic pictures of it has the seven dwarves on the side of the building. Usually, if you ever look at it, like do a Google search for Disney headquarters, that'll be the picture that shows up. He's going to be in that building. So directly, I've ridden the elevators in that building many times, and you hop in the elevator, and there's Iger and Jerry Bruckheimer, for instance, or
Yeah.
so he's going to be in that group. Another important part is that it's an SVP level position. This is at the absolute top tier of executive levels in the company, and so he's going to have a voice in the room. He's going to command authority and respect. Now, Disney's really good in terms of respecting voices at all levels. But when an SVP walks in the room and speaks, it's a little bit like E.F. Hutton. Everyone listens, if you remember that
Yeah.
classic line. So he's going to have a voice and authority. And the final really important note to take away from this announcement is the reporting structure. And this gives us a lot of hints as to where Disney might be going. One of the things I had suspected was that when they appointed someone to this position, they could put him as like a tech executive or as a consumer products executive. which would have told us two different things. But he's reporting to Kareem Daniels, who is the head of distribution of all content for Disney. So Kareem's team determines, all right, we have a Star Wars show coming. Does it go to Disney Plus, or does it become an ABC special? Does it become a feature film? So Kareem's team being the determiner of where content goes and having Mike White reporting to him tells you that this is a content first approach, that they're looking at the metaverse as an outlet for distributing content and stories. And so what I take from that is that Disney will be self-publishing. So they'll be creating their own, whether it's their own marketplace or their own partnerships to create marketplaces, they will be building in that space. It prioritizes publishing over licensing. And we should talk about that in 1 second. But also reporting to Kareem really sends the signal that this is storytelling and we're looking to engage consumers with stories. And it supports my hypothesis that the blockchain is a media platform that's beginning to emerge around us. So I was really excited about the announcement. I felt like if I had 8 or 9 checkboxes, they hit every one but one of them.
What was the one that they didn't hit?
Yeah, the only one that they didn't hit, and I think this is really more just some positioning, was they've hinted that it's really in support or to drive Disney Plus. And I've always suspected, and I've actually been on Twitter quite active, saying that Disney's path to the metaverse is quote unquote spectacular and is driven through the theme parks. And in my mind, what I see years down the road is the Disney theme park on the blockchain. But I understand why they might be pushing it behind Disney Plus a little bit, because that's obviously a priority right now. It needs a little bit of help. So I think kind of it's marrying to something that needs a little bit of help with something that's really kind of hot and trendy right now. So that'd be the only checkbox it didn't hit.
Yeah. You mentioned the difference between publishing and licensing, and how this is, I think, more towards the publishing side that they might be falling towards. Can you go in a bit more detail on that?
Yeah, and I'm going to break this down very simply into 3 buckets. And I've created a little bit of a stir in the past when I've talked about publishing and licensing in terms of VV, and I'll talk about that in this right now. So there's really, think of 3 ways that an old media brand like Disney, or take a Universal, could come and bring their content and stories and characters to the blockchain. One is, and I think what most people go to first, is licensing, which is very much what you're seeing, like Paramount has done with the Recur marketplace, to bring in Star Trek NFTs as a licensing deal. And what that is it's very transactional. I'm going to sell you a Star Trek NFT for, let's just say, $200. And 10% of that is going to go back to Paramount. And so it's very much we get a percent. You have the right to use our imagery, our characters, our brand, and you're going to give us 10% of anything you make. Now that percent will be variable, but 10 is always just a good ballpark discussion point. The second possibility is publishing. That'd be if Paramount were to say, you know what, we don't want to give 80%, 90% to these other entities. We want to keep it all to ourselves, and we want to have more control over the experience that consumers will have with our brands and how we position and sell that. That would be self-publishing. The challenge with self-publishing, it's a lot harder to do. It's a lot riskier, but the upside is much bigger. My belief is that Disney has to get into self-publishing, that it just doesn't make sense to be a licensing entity. Now, Disney is a very big licensing company, has a tendency and perhaps an inertia to want to do licensing. And that's exactly what happened with the Vivi deal. And it's very much a toe in the water. Let's try this out. We're going to license some properties to Vivi. But I think long-term, and what we saw with this announcement with Mike White, their path is into self-publishing. And so I was happy in that regard to see that, okay, we're going to see maybe another year or 2 of licensing as their toe in the water, but behind the scenes, they're putting the pieces in place for self-publishing. And that's exactly where I think they need to be.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially for an entity the size of Disney, and for something as large as the metaverse, it makes sense for them to want to have their own. Yeah,
I can't think of, maybe Apple, and maybe a few like companies like Apple, but I can't think of many companies that have a bigger opportunity on the blockchain than Disney does.
Yeah, seriously,
Yeah, and that'll only be realized with self-publishing. Now, the third category, which I mentioned, is promotions. And I created a bit of a stir. I'm very anti-promotions. And what a promotion is, think of it like a quid pro quo. We're going to give you this for that. So we're going to let you, when you go to see like a Spider-Man movie and they've got to deal with Burger King, and Burger King is, they run their ad and they say, go see Spider-Man on whatever date.
Yeah.
That's a promotion. And they're very effective marketing tools. But what I don't like that is that it minimizes or it devalues the space. It devalues the opportunity to say, the NFT community, the blockchain community, they're only worth or good for marketing promotions. There's not a business to be built on top of it. It's just a marketing tool. And that's why I don't like it, because I think it disrespects the space. And I think it minimizes the opportunity. And more importantly, inside the company, the licensor, so let's say it was Disney with Golden Moments and VV. You just saw this with Autograph, just did something with Lionsgate around one of their movies. That was a promotion. So I'm concerned that we're beginning to see more of these. And what it does is it creates a headspace of the metaverse is just a marketing tool. It's not a media platform to build on. And so I think it's going to if those companies really get that mindset set in, it's going to set them back, and it will set the space back. And that's why I don't like promotional deals, and I think they should stay away from them. The other aspect I don't like of this, I'll kick the hornet's nest again, is that on the VV deal, they had a program called Golden Moments, and it was a promotion for Disney Plus. And what I didn't like about it is that they issued the very first Mickey Mouse NFT in history, and it was a promotion. Yeah. And it just felt like they just left a ton of value on the table. Now, for those people who bought those NFTs, the Golden Moments collections, they did amazing. I would say hold those, because when the mainstream Disney collectors come in, you're sitting on a fortune. So kudos to everyone who bought into the Golden Moments. You may have gotten an opportunity that you didn't realize how big it was. Yeah. But Disney left a lot of value on the table, and that's why I wasn't a fan of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You think it was just sort of a lack of understanding of how big this all is? Yeah.
Yep. I think there was pressure to do some deals, especially this is deeper in the pandemic. I think there was pressure to do some deals to drive Disney Plus subscriptions, and someone just said, hey, we can do something with this NFT thing that's emerging. Yeah. And no one ever thought, what was the value of the first Mickey Mouse NFT, and how they could have auctioned that in a Dutch auction and probably 1,000 ETH. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, more probably.
Yeah. So they left a lot of value on the table.
Yeah, I think so. It does seem like, early last year, I think or early to mid last year, when a lot of these, I think, licensing agreements were put in place, a lot of people were still thinking of NFTs as like a fad, because it blown up. It was like, going crazy for a couple of months, and then it was like dying off a little bit. And now it's been a year, and it's still very much out there in the zeitgeist. And, clearly people and companies are recognizing the importance of it, which is great to see.
Yeah, and I think there's some tremendous opportunities for either tools that will help bring traditional brands into the blockchain, or consulting opportunities to bring traditional brands in the blockchain. I think the traditional brands are beginning to wake up. They're realizing that this just wasn't a hot summer of 21 NFT thing, and it's gone for the next hot thing. That these are actually going to stick around, and it's culture. Culture is very powerful. It's the root of civilization. If you go back when we were still walking around with sitting around fires in the open plains, what held everyone together was culture. It was storytelling, and it's a really powerful force.
This, I think, brings us perfectly back to something you said earlier about the difference between lore and mythology. Can you sort of explain what the difference is there?
Yeah, I love this concept. I was just thinking about this recently, and that one of the things that got me thinking about it is that I see a lot of NFT projects talk about their lore, and I love that.
Yeah,
I was thinking that at Disney we always talk about mythology, and so what's this difference between lore and mythology? And I actually pulled out the dictionary and started actually researching the actual what is the actual definition of lore and mythology. And in any context prior to NFTs, it wouldn't have mattered. Like lore and mythology, they're used very interchangeably. It's common. There's no right or wrong there. But in NFTs, there actually could be a distinction, and I want to go a little deeper on this in the future. Is mythology is very much sort of a top-driven, this is the myth of the world, this is the setup of the world. And lore is very kind of, I'll call it lower level driven by the people in the world. And so when I think of this, now let's apply this to a world where you've got a creator of an NFT and the purchasers, the community of the NFT. So a project, an artist, a creator can create a mythology around, let's say, Crypto Monster Lab. I love the Crypto Monster Lab project. So
Yeah.
I'll give that. I'll pop drop their name today.
Yeah.
So
Great.
Santiago, the artist behind Crypto Monster Lab, has an idea for the mythology of the world he's created with these crypto monsters. But the community that buys those NFTs will have an opportunity to create the lore, their
Mm.
own individual stories within that world. And I can't think of any other example where that's ever happened, other than maybe fan fiction,
Yeah.
like traditional fan fiction, where you actually have an important distinction between mythology and lore. And I think there's going to be a really healthy dynamic that develops between the creator who creates some mythology, but then the community creates the lore that fills in that mythology.
It sounds fascinating. Yeah. Like I had never thought of it, but yeah. And then the creator creates the mythology, community creates lore, but then, creator can continue to add to the mythology, and then the lore can evolve, the mythology can evolve, and it's this,
Yeah.
living organism.
Yeah, now some people might say you're just being content geeks and who cares? But I'm a content geek, so I love it. And
Yeah.
if you want to go like the origin of the word lore, it comes from folklore, which means
Mm.
the lore of the common folk. So it was the stories that the common folk created around, usually around scary creatures or monsters in the woods back in the earlier in civilization. So I think
I think
it's a fun concept.
it's fun, but I think there's like real value and importance to understanding it as well, because like NFTs, they're so different to almost any other asset. Like, I mean, if you think of them as assets, like if you take the the relatively close parallel of traditional cryptocurrencies and people who are trading them, buying and selling them, it's very much an investment vehicle. No one is particularly emotionally attached to Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ether, or anything like that. When NFTs come into the play, all of a sudden there's this emotional attachment to what is still a financial asset, like because there's value on it, it goes up and down in price. But almost anyone who has owned NFTs knows how difficult it is to sell your NFTs, especially if it's, say, the only NFT you have in a collection. It's just sort of like you're cutting ties with that collection. Every day I see on Twitter, people say, I'm really sad to have to sell this last NFT. I'm no longer part of this community. And then a lot of the community members, if they're a good community, be like, you're still part of the community. If you had one, you're still here with us, etc.
Mhm.
But this emotional connection that is there because of the community, but also the lore, the world building, the storytelling, and the mythology. It's powerful.
Community holds you together.
Mhm.
Funny story. This might be a little embarrassing for myself, but I don't even know how to sell an NFT.
Aha, that's
I've never
amazing. I
sold
love it.
one.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
I
I've
love
only
it.
been in the space for about a year now, but I've never sold one, so I don't even know
That is
how.
an incredibly long time to have not sold an NFT. There are a few people I know that have never sold NFTs, and it's fantastic. Like, if you're approaching it from you're a collector, you just like NFTs, you want to be part of the community, you want to be part of the story in the world, then why would you sell? You buy it for all the right reasons and you hold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never bought an NFT with a perspective of it's a financial tool that I'm going to sell
Mm,
for profit later. It's always just been because I love the project, I love the art, I love something about it. And even I've bought projects that have been unsuccessful, but I still bought
mhm.
into them after the fact because I just love the art.
Yeah.
And
No, that's fantastic. And
at a low
that's
price, of
that's the
course, but
yeah. Hopefully, if it's been unsuccessful, yeah. But that's the beauty of NFTs. You have everyone on both, like, you're at one end of the spectrum, and then there's people on the other end who don't give two hoots about the art, the story, the lore. They're just here to make money and flip, and it's
Mhm.
purely a financial vehicle, investment vehicle. And then there's everyone in the middle. I would say most people fit somewhere in that gray area in the middle where they're attracted, they want to make money or they want to collect, but if the price is right, they'll sell, or they initially buy because they want to make money, but then they form an emotional attachment and then they never want to sell. And it's this really wonderful gray area.
Yeah,
Um,
there's this dynamic currently in the space of everyone's concerned about floor price. Everyone's concerned
mm,
about the financial aspects of NFTs. And I get because we kind of evolved into NFTs out of the hot DeFi craze a
yeah,
couple years ago. But I think for a lot of new people coming in, they're coming in because more of the art or more of the community building. And so
yeah,
over time, as more mainstream, as we move into early adopter phase and then mainstream adopter phase in a couple of years, they're just going to swamp the space of what's this DeFi stuff? I don't care about that. I just care. I love this character, and there's a great community that I can participate in. So I think that's
it
a good
really,
dynamic. Yeah.
yeah, it really is what's bringing what crypto mainstream, because people who weren't really interested in finance and tech now all of a sudden are interested in art and culture. At the heart of it, it's really is
Mhm.
culture. What are some projects that you think have done the lore and mythology side of things really well? I know we mentioned Woody's and Crypto Monster Labs. Are there any other ones that have been sort of on your mind, on your radar?
Yeah, Mars Premier League or Martian Premier League.
Martian Premier, like I love them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm
I really like
actually,
what
yeah, I've been advising them. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what they're doing. I like the art. I like that they're building a story and a lore.
Mm,
They're definitely on my radar now, and I've been watching them. Crypto Monster Lab, I already mentioned. I'm a big
mm,
fan of. I think they've done a great job. Deadfellas has done amazing.
yeah.
I think I love the Deadfellas project. I keep talking about these projects. I'm not a holder of any of them. I should buy a Woody or a
Good.
Deadfella.
You should. You should. Yeah, there's too many projects. That's the thing. There's like so many wonderful projects out there, which is great, but it's also like you have to pick and choose and
Yeah,
miss some.
Yeah, let's talk about Deadfellas for a second
Mm,
because I love they just minted their Dead Friends, which
yeah.
I will call a brand extension, which is sort of the
Hmm.
next kind of spin-off of that core brand. And there's a couple things there. I love that it's a way to engage, bring more people into the community. Now, most of those went to existing holders, but they'll eventually get sold, and it expands the collection. I also like that it's a new character type with I think there's like a
Yeah.
dog, there's a bird, there's a hybrid, and others. So I like that it expands the character types. Um, there's a lot to like there, and there's a lot of opportunities for storytelling.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the project. That is a project that I'm a huge fan of, and also not a holder of. I need to remedy that, but
Mm.
yeah. Again, so many projects.
Yeah, another project that has my attention, and I don't know if it's really that they're building lore, but I think they're doing some interesting things. And of course, nouns. I would love to own a noun.
Right? Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, David Horvath. I don't know if anyone knows, but David Horvath is one of the original noun buyers. I think he owns like noun number 3 or 4.
Mm,
So he got in very early, and he's leading a project to oversee sort of a noun studio, which is to use some of the nouns treasury to fund storytelling projects that are built
mm,
with the nouns. So I think that's a really interesting approach. And David Horvath is, if no one knows, he was the creator of the Ugly Dolls franchise, and I met him actually 20 years ago in passing at a big licensing convention in Vegas called Licensing Show. I'm sure he would never remember, but
yeah.
I went to their booth and met him like in their very early days. They're like their
Wow.
second year of existence, and so it's been exciting to see what they're working on.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up nouns, because it sort of takes us to CCO and this idea of,
Mhm.
there being no license, or like the intellectual property is in public domain. Anyone can use it to do basically whatever they want. What are your thoughts on that in
Yeah,
general in the NFT space? Yeah, with nouns and other
yeah.
projects.
What I think is that the dialogue right now seems to be very much of a CCO is the only option. Like if it's project's
Mm,
not CCO, then it's not on the cutting edge. And I don't see it that way. I like CCO. I think the CCO is absolutely the right thing for some projects, but not every project.
mm,
And I think some projects are better off with a more restricted license. It's going back to that, what is your long-term plan and what you really want to do, and being prepared for that up front. Because you don't want to give a CCO up front if you have some other ideas of what you want to do with the characters of the brand.
mhm.
Because essentially that's when you're saying it's all open.
Yeah.
So it's easier to open it later down the road than up front. And so Super Geisha, which was a block project, just minted like 3 weeks ago. I was loosely involved in that. What I liked about how Super Geisha handled this was they announced to the buyers ahead of time, the community ahead of time, that we're going to launch with a slightly more restricted license because we have ideas for how we want to take the brand long term. But in 90 days, 120 days, we're going to have a vote. And everyone in
Mm,
the community can say, okay, do we want to go CC0 or do we want to keep it more restricted? And
mm,
we're going to present to you the pros and cons or the business case for both options. And I liked that approach, which was saying, we're going to we're going to have an idea for long term. So we're going to have restricted, but if the community wants CCO, then have at it.
yeah.
So I like that approach.
Yeah, I agree completely. That's my favorite approach. I think Blitmaps did something very similar, where they launched, and then a few months later they basically had a community vote, and overwhelmingly the community voted for CC0, and then they did that.
I was saying this also brings up a question. I've asked this for a number of projects I've consulted with in the last month. Who is your customer? And no one, when I first say that, most people say like, well, it's the people who buy the NFTs. Great, but you have you want, say, you Project X want to create a comic book, or you want to create a TV show or a toy line or whatever it is. Who's the customer? The customer who buys the TV show or the T-shirt or watches the TV show, or is it the customer who buys the NFT, which is the source for that storytelling? And the answer in almost all cases will be the person who buys the NFT. But for some projects, it might be that second level customer, that the NFT buyers become a partner, called it like a partner in the publishing of the story. And you collectively, as the holders of the collection and the creator, are now looking at a customer who's one step removed. And that might force you, and that might put you in to make slightly different decisions. And I don't think any project's really thinking about that right now, but I think that's an important question to ask for every project to ask up front, even though right now, most of the projects, we know the answers will be the NFT buyer.
Yeah.
But I think long term, some of those answers might more commonly be, it's the second tier buyer that is our customer.
I think that, it's a really good thing to be thinking about. Something I sort of on the other side of that often ask people who ask me, what's a good NFT project to buy? How do I decide which project to buy into? How do you evaluate projects? I say take a step back and think about, why do you even want to buy an NFT in the first place? Is it an investment vehicle? Are you trying to do you want to buy it for the art? Are you trying to be part of a community? Really think about the why of your decision making before, people seem to just skip that step on both ends of it, I think. So
yeah, there's a lot of like, okay, I've heard about this hot project over here, I'm going to go over and buy in without knowing much about it. And I buyer beware, first of all, right? That and for me, I've not bought into projects that I knew were good projects, but they just didn't do it right for me. I either didn't like the art, I didn't like something about it, and I knew I was giving up an opportunity, but at the same time, I chose not to jump in. Also, I believe we're going to come to this question of the teams, like how do you identify quality projects? And what I love that's happening in the community, like really, there's a lot in the last 2 weeks around identifying bad projects and good projects, and what are the traits. And I think those traits will become more defined and identifiable over time of, okay, here are the 10 things that good projects do, and here are the 10 things that bad projects do. And in between, there's some discussion to be had. And it's almost like a seal of quality. Like, okay, this project did A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, so they're clicking the check marks of, okay, this is probably a good project.
Yeah, the market is maturing. Like, it's still so early and so wild westian out there. But you can definitely tell that people are getting more discerning with, in researching projects. And thankfully, thankfully, more and more people are like, I think, less likely to part with their money with these low effort cash grabby type projects where there's an anonymous team, and the education of, how do you identify good projects is getting better. It's still not great, and probably for a long time it's still not going to be great, but it's going to take time. But the market is maturing, and hopefully that means that these really good projects that have excellent teams, passionate, hardworking, that are building good products, rise to the top, and don't get sort of overshadowed and overlooked for these shitty little cash grab projects, basically.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about pedigree, that pedigree will become really important in this space, that a team that has a reputation, that is really, they have the same team over repeatedly, that coming together and has a good reputation, has delivered and not pulled scams or been honest when there's been a problem, that they'll build a reputation, or what I call pedigree. And the teams with pedigree will rise to the top, and the teams that are more scammy won't have pedigree, and they'll eventually go to the bottom and get pushed out to the sides.
Yeah, no, that's hits the nail on the head. I was talking about this the other day, I think on a Twitter Spaces. Someone was asking, is it important that a team is doxed, their identity is revealed, or can anonymous teams be okay? And I was saying that I don't care who someone is. Like, I don't need to know what they look like. I don't need their real name. It doesn't matter who they are. What matters to me is their reputation. And again, that's their track record. That's their history. in the Web3 space, if they've been around since 2013, 2017, built products, built protocols, have a Twitter presence, and people know them by their pseudonym, and they have this reputation, that's enough for me to say,
Yeah.
okay, great. But if it's someone who has never done anything in this space and is coming from, the outside world, then it's much more difficult to trust them. And that's where it helps to know, okay, so they may have no experience in Web3, but they've spent 10 years working at Disney, or 15
Yep.
years building this product, and at Google they have the tech knowledge, and then all right, then okay, that's their reputation on the line. It's when someone is fully anonymous and has no reputation and no identity, that's when I think people should be scared, right?
Yeah, agree completely. And that's like the Martian Premier League. I love that they're fully doxed. They have no prior track record in the NFT Web3 space, but they have an amazing track record in the media entertainment space in the real world. And so I trust them because they fully dox themselves and have given us that background. But you're right. Like if someone were to launch a project today, fully kind of fully pseudonymous, I can never say that word.
Me either.
And
It's so difficult. Yeah.
And they have no track record whatsoever. I'm not going to go in.
No.
But I'm seeing projects that are just successful and over of people are jumping in, but then they shut down the Discord 2 weeks later and the Twitter 2 weeks later. You sold out, and people are complaining. But why did you buy in? That was the first warning sign.
Yeah, there are red flags everywhere, but people get caught up with greed, I think, and FOMO and hype, and they think, in some cases, I've heard people say they know it's a scam, but they just want to get in and then get out before the scam is like.
I can pump and dump before. I can dump faster than you can.
Exactly, and it's like, all right, but know that you're playing with fire. A, but B, the worst part is you're actually supporting the people perpetrating these scams, and that's probably the worst part. So
you're just encouraging the next one. You're just encouraging the next one.
As long as they can get away with it, they're just going to keep doing it because it's very low risk if they're fully anonymous.
Yeah, we're still in such early days. I feel like they will eventually be forced out to the margins. Now, if you look at the history of any industry, you go as old school industries like railroads, full of scams in the beginning, early days. And eventually over time, the scammers got pushed to the margins and then out. Film, same thing. Every industry in its early days has scammers, and every industry develops its own processes or protocols or pedigree to identify who quality people are and who bad people are. And so we're following a dynamic that every other industry has followed. It's just we're in such early days. The pushing out hasn't quite happened yet, but it will come.
100%. I always like to use the analogy of like the early days of the internet and email. So like late in the 90s and early 2000s, email scams were rife. You get tons of emails, and if you clicked on every single one, they'd be like, oh, you've won $1 million. Click on this link and fill out this form. Oh, my uncle has left me a $40 million inheritance. I just need you to send me $5,000 and I will unlock it and share it with you. And people were getting bamboozled because they weren't familiar with this new technology and industry. It doesn't mean that the technology was bad. It doesn't mean the internet or email was bad. It was just that there were bad actors using it for nefarious reasons, like with any industry, like with any new technology. And then we came up with spam filters, and that was on the tech side to help. And then on the consumer side, basically just awareness and education. People became to know, oh, if someone says you've won $1 million on the internet, it's you probably haven't. Go back 20 years, people were getting letters in the mail saying you've won $1 million.
It's how many Nigerian prince scams did you receive? But those have kind of dried. They're still around, but they've kind of dried up. Now there's other scams replacing it. So
but I was researching it the other day. They still get an unfortunately large amount of money perpetrating this scam just around the world because
well, the internet's still growing. It's still we're not fully it's still there's still new people coming in. And it actually goes back to kind of going back to the Disney thing when I was mentioning about self-publishing. It's one of the arguments I think supports that they'll eventually move into self-publishing. They have to move into the space. The opportunity is just too good for them not to. But they're going to be very concerned about that Disney experience. What happens when mainstream Disney consumers start moving in and purchasing? They're going to be very concerned about that being a good experience and the perception of scams. And so I believe that they'll eventually have their own self-publishing. They'll have their own marketplace where they can have more control of that experience. Now, is that against the spirit of decentralization? Yes. But this is one company doing their thing. It's not
Mm,
the entire space moving. And
yeah.
I hope that they'll build. My dream is that they'll fork like a layer 2 solution and build on top of Ethereum. So
Yeah,
that's my
that would be
dream.
ideal. Yeah. I think the fear is that these companies will build like take their own little closed garden approach, and then not have it be there won't be true NFTs with true ownership. It'll be like you'll have ownership within the Disney ecosystem, but you can't take it to Ethereum. But
Yeah, it's
yeah.
kind of almost like if you think of like the Disney theme park example, like the theme park on the blockchain. Okay, you can come into the theme park. It's going to be a safe experience. We're going to control it, and we're going to make sure you have
Mhm.
a good time. And if you want to walk out those gates over into the rest of Orlando, go ahead.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
free to
yeah, yeah.
walk out the gate and see what else Orlando has to offer. But
Yeah. The
if you
wild
want
world out there. Yeah.
the wild world of Orlando,
Yes. The mean streets of Orlando, where crime is high. um, yeah. All right. I want to ask another question, a little more open ended. So, if it was up to you, if you had carte blanche to launch and create a project in terms of like building out the lore or the mythology, and the brand and the storytelling from the ground up, what would your sort of approach be? Would you hire screenwriters to build out some storytelling? Would you, yeah, just what would you do with a blank slate trying to launch an NFT community?
yeah. So let's talk about the storytelling first in the lore. And I would definitely approach it from the storytelling first before I got locked into an art style or a visual representation. And this is actually similar to how a lot of film projects would work, which is before they hire concept designers and the production designers, they'll develop that story first, at least at a high level. And
Mm,
then they'll have a creative, like a director, come in and say, I kind of see it being this stylization or this stylization. And then they'll find the right artist to partner with.
mm,
And the great thing about storytelling, and no one's really been pursuing this yet, I think that bringing in screenwriters, like really Hollywood level screenwriters, to work on these projects is a real possibility here. And the reason why is that a screenwriter, really even a successful one, has a lot of downtime between projects. They might be
mm,
writing 5 or 6 things simultaneously, but they're going to have downtime between projects. And what this new emerging storytelling platform offers is a chance for them to stay busy with their storytelling skills, but in a new space. And it can even become a place where they're a partner in a franchise. So one of the
mm,
challenges has always been of when a franchise is created, who gets to participate in the economic value that's created? Well, the
mm,
actors, who are certainly the stars that you need to keep bringing over, the studio that takes all the financial risk and owns it, the director or producer usually are also, and then it kind of stops there. And sometimes the writers, like on Pirates of the Caribbean, those writers got to participate, but that's a little unusual. So now here's a
mm,
chance where you've got really talented writers who might be looking for some side projects or some side hustles, and the needs in the space are nowhere near as demanding as a full-time film job or TV job. So they can participate and they can have an ownership participation in it.
mm.
So when it does get picked up, if it does get picked up to become a TV show, they have participation as an owner. And I think so. There's a really compelling story to be made or case to be made for a lot of really big name writers to come into the space. Just I don't think it's happened yet because for a number of reasons, because maybe just no one's really made the right approach or known how to
Mm,
approach them. There's certainly a lot of people I talk to in Hollywood still think like, oh, NFTs, it's all a scam. What are you doing over there?
yeah.
But I think those roadblocks are going to slowly disappear very, very quickly too, by the way. And so I think there's some tremendous opportunities there. So I would first try to find one of those great writers and really think about this bigger story and then identify what's the art direction we want to go in and then develop
Mm,
the art style. And now you're coming with a lore, you're coming with an art style. And then on the marketing, on the so-called the business operations side, I would also do a lot of things like we used to do on my team. Of we would analyze the property of what's the strengths and weaknesses. Okay, it's great for kids. It's not great for boys, but maybe young girls. It's great for teens, and identify kind of where's that compelling sell, and then identify kind of your marketing and your launch plan from there. So I would take a lot more time in planning up ahead
mm.
and how we're going to come to market before
That's
actually
that's
building anything.
yeah. I hope someone listening to this takes that because that's such a fantastic playbook, of how to probably launch a very successful NFT project and brand and franchise and all of that, which hasn't really happened yet. Um, So when I asked the question, it was somewhat selfish because I've got Zen Academy here, which is my project and community that we launched without much of a plan or vision. It was basically just building a small community with a focus on education. This year, though, we've been thinking about the direction we want to take it in, building out the world and the storytelling. And yeah, I mean, getting someone to help with the writing and the lore at an early stage makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we have some artwork done that was done. Actually, I commissioned like a few artists last year just to take the word Zen Academy and build whatever they wanted in their own art style, and then we got a few different samples. And this is one of my favorites. But yeah, you've given me something to think about as well, like reaching out to a Hollywood screenwriter. Like, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, no, and one of the things I think is going to happen, it is actually is happening. I should say, I think it is happening. Is that a lot of these entities that are forming? I'll call them an NFT studio, like Yuga Labs, NFT Lab, either way. They're now beginning to get signed deals. They're getting agencies, representation. Now, for those folks, these are certainly like the biggest names in the space right now. They're going to be introduced to writers through that agency partnership. They're going to have those opportunities open up, but I think a lot more of those are going to open up as teams come together as an entity and get pedigree and get a reputation. Okay. And so that screenwriters say, it's all scam, but I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to listen.
Yeah.
But who am I going to listen to? I'm only going to listen to the most respected names. And all of a sudden those partnerships will form. And I think it is happening.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it is happening, and we'll see more of it just as more people stop seeing NFTs as a scam and a fad and a Ponzi, and it might take a while, but yeah.
I have a friend, a former coworker, who has been very vocal on Twitter, like just NFTs are a scam. It's the worst thing ever. And I reached out to him. Actually, he responded to one of my recent tweets. And I said, look, if you're really serious and want to learn, I'm happy to take an hour and do a Zoom call. And I'll take you through what I see in the space. Take the emotion out of it, and I'll tell you what's the good, the bad, and the ugly of what I see in the space, and why I'm really thinking about the next half of my career focused on it full time. And I didn't hear from him for a couple of weeks. So I'm like, okay, he wanted to hear, but he doesn't want to hear. And then all of a sudden, he just put time on my calendar for next week. So okay.
Oh wow.
He's ready. I'm going to convert. I'm going to convert the next one.
Yeah, one at a time. That's how this works. I recently found some chat logs with a friend of mine who very first introduced me to NFTs. It was basically a year ago, like it was early mid-February. And for like a 1 to 2 week period, I explicitly called NFTs a scam, probably a dozen times, a dozen different occasions, because he was sharing some screenshots of like, we had some mutual friends who were buying and selling JPEGs for tens of thousands of dollars. And I was like very dismissive. Oh, are they still in this scam? Have they lost all their money yet? Blah, 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 blah. And then eventually I did the research and I read some really good content and it clicked. And it takes that. It takes someone walking you through, someone providing some good content, or like, again, because the default presumption for most people is that it's a scam, because it just doesn't make sense. It's difficult to wrap our heads around the idea that a digital asset can be valuable, let alone that valuable, when for 20, 30 years, it's all been free. You've always just been able to copy, paste, and send things. So it's going to take time, but we're getting there.
Everyone will have hopefully a pivot point that makes a change. Like my brother, I love to use my brother as an example. He was an early believer in cryptocurrency. He started investing like $100 of every paycheck in Bitcoin. This is going back 7 or 8 years ago. So he got in really early, but never did anything more. It was always just $100 automatically taken out of his account, never looked at it. And I'm sure he's done extremely well for himself.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
I've never asked him, but I'm sure he's done extremely well for himself. He's not the kind of guy that will ever show it. He'll just drive a beat up pickup truck for the rest of his life.
Yeah. I love it.
But he's never bought an NFT. He's never done anything with DeFi. It's just that automated every paycheck. And so he came to me over the holidays and asked, like, okay, what's this NFT thing?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't get it. I'm like, okay, well, I'll take you through it. And when you understand it, you're going to like it. But I'll take you through it. And it's not a scam. It's legit. Just you have to know what to look for and what not to look for.
Yeah. It's not a scam, but there are a lot of scams in the space. So it's easy for people to conflate the two. Especially, if their only exposure is something that they've seen on social media or elsewhere that portrays it negatively.
And the popular media seems to really want to, and I suppose I should have better answer. I don't know why popular media likes to crap all over the industry. It just feels like
Mm,
all the major media outlets just they want to write the sensational headlines of another scam, and they don't want to talk about the successful projects other than the occasional article about punks or apes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other successful projects to talk about, and I don't know why the mainstream media doesn't want to do the focus on
Yeah.
the good in the space.
Perhaps they feel threatened because, Web3, the power of it is that the middlemen are cut out, and a lot of the value goes directly to the creators, content creators, the artists, the writers, and maybe there's something there, or maybe it's just ignorance and they don't really get it themselves. Maybe a bit
Maybe I just
both.
need to reach out to each reporter one at a time and say, if you're ready, I'll
Yes,
take an hour and I'll take you through it.
you're the hero we don't
Yeah,
deserve, John.
I'll identify 3 people that need to have just that casual introduction and reach out to
Yeah.
them and say, okay, here you go.
I think that is like largely how it is spreading so much. I think myself and almost everyone that I know that's in the space, we have had friends of ours who have, heard about NFTs somewhere and know that we're in it. And they come to us eventually and they're like, all right, what is this NFT stuff? And then, it's a long process of trying to explain it. It takes time. It's not easy, but yeah, it's very one by one.
Yeah, there's an
Yeah.
artist named Nick Yarger who was my creative director when I was the CMO at Ninkasi Brewing Company. He was my creative director. We had an amazing history. He was the head of creative for Billabong, for Quicksilver, for Tony Hawk. He worked for Shepard Fairey. Has this amazing history in Southern California surf and skate culture, and just this amazing artist. And I kept telling him, like, you got to get into this space. This is like your style.
Yeah.
You're so unique with that culture of like Southern California culture, and you would have a great position, and your art is amazing. And he resisted for a long time, and now over about 3 weeks ago, I went and had dinner with him, and I think
Yeah.
he wants to talk about what his first collection might look like and how he might
Oh,
actually get
wow.
in. So I'm psyched that he might move in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, every day new people are finding and entering the space, and that's going to happen for a few years, I think, and then it'll sort of be mainstream. But we're a while away. But
Yeah.
that's fine.
Switching topics, I was going to ask you a
Yeah,
question.
yeah, yeah.
Just because it's on my mind right now quite a bit, and that's about kind of other chains, layer 2 solutions, and kind of what you think NFTs are going in that space.
Yeah, I think so. At the moment, it's obviously very largely the NFT activity happens on Ethereum mainnet. That's where most people think of NFTs. There's been over the last year a good amount of activity on other chains. I think the biggest two or the biggest three, probably Solana, Polygon, and Tezos. Tezos has sort of carved out this wonderful niche as like a bohemian art scene where a lot of creators and collectors are going there. It's environmentally friendly. Gas transaction costs are extremely low. It just has developed this niche, and I think that's wonderful. Solana has sort of like a mixed bag reputation. It's sort of got this bad rep for launching a lot of copycat derivative projects, just copy pasting from Ethereum, low effort. A lot of the drops are botted because it's not gas. It's like who has the fastest connection and different issues. But there are still really good legitimate projects that have dropped on Solana, especially. I think there's a few gaming projects that can utilize like the fast transaction speeds and low transaction costs in a way that you can't do on Ethereum. So I think, and then Polygon as well, it's sort of again been more focused on gaming projects, especially those on Ethereum mainnet. Some of them have like migrated over or just launched directly on there. I know Cool Cats, their game is going to be on the Polygon chain. EtherOrcs, they were on mainnet and then they migrated to Polygon. Zrun launched directly on Polygon and stuff like that. So I see what I see happening is other chains carve out niches for themselves, and as time goes on, more and more activity just has to be on not Ethereum mainnet. And I think that like other blockchains entirely, Solana and Tezos will carve out niches, and then we'll have layer 2 solutions like Arbitrum, like Starknet, which are starting to pop up and see some activity. Arbitrum over the last few months has really gotten a lot of attention. That will probably be over the coming years where a lot of the NFT activity migrates to, and it's going to take some time, like the bridging process, to get money over, to get NFTs over, to get people aware and feeling comfortable and safe doing so, moving assets around. It'll take some time, but eventually, yeah, I think a lot of the NFT activity will happen on probably layer 2 solutions on Ethereum, and mainnet will be sort of this place for all the legacy NFTs. Like most of the things that we know now will probably remain on mainnet and be higher value, and then potentially like high end. Sorry, my dog is pulling up my microphone cord. There we go. Uh, Probably like the high end, like luxury, maybe one of one art and like really good generative art will still continue to launch on mainnet, but it'll be sort of not where the majority of NFT activity takes. It just can't be. Like the chain cannot handle that many transactions. Like it's already struggling, and we're at a fraction of the market size that we will be at.
Yeah, I've been putting a lot of time into really thinking about it, and it seems like you're right. Like if someone's going to go buy a Beeple, you're right. You're going to be on layer 1. You're never going to. The gas costs are just trivial.
Yeah.
You're not even think about it. But if you want to issue a 10,000 PFP collection and have it at a price point that is accessible to, say, call mainstream consumers, call it $50. Gas costs have to be less than 10% of that, or else it'll never work. And so I've been thinking a lot that the vast majority of NFT sales will eventually have to move to a layer 2 or an alt-chain kind of solution.
Definitely agree. Extending on that, I think the price of these PFP projects, they're going to go down so much. I think $50 is going to be the high end. So a lot of them will be $5, and a lot of them will be free because brands will want to give out. It'll be brand awareness. Like, does Disney? Sure, they can charge, 100. They can charge whatever they want really for NFTs, but at a certain point, it could just be like a nice value add to anyone who visits one of their theme parks, whether it's real life or in the metaverse. Gets a QR code they can scan, they get a free NFT, and it's like stuff like that. Yeah,
you ride Space Mountain 3 times in a weekend, and you get your NFT. And
exactly. Yeah, all sorts of ways to add them into the ecosystem.
That's probably the reason why I think that their future is to actually fork a layer 2 and make their own Disney Magic chain, and they'll control that experience. And as long as the bridging is possible, like, okay, you want to leave the theme park and take your Space Mountain NFT to layer 1, feel free. Here's the way to do it. And as long as that works, then I think there's a lot of potential there.
I think so too. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then, people who collect their NFTs, they'll be able to enjoy them and have them in the digital metaverse galleries and houses and real life houses and digital frames, and just merge these worlds together. It's going to be a wild and wacky and amazing future, isn't it? Next 10 years.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be so much fun. It is so much fun. Yeah. All right. I think I'm out of questions. Was there anything else if you have any more questions for me, or was there anything else you wanted to talk about or mention?
The only thing was really just, I think that was really a question I had for you, was on the layer 2s and the other chains, just because I think it is the future.
Yeah. So I think one more question just came to me, actually.
You might hear my daughter now, by the way.
She's back. Matisse.
Matisse is back.
Yeah. With Disney, appointing head of Metaverse, or this new position to build out their Metaverse presence, do you have any inkling of a time frame when they sort of might enter in a more real way?
It'll be a while. I think what the signals are, there's 2 signals that we got here. One was that obviously Mike White was appointed to this position, and he has a lot to build, and it's going to take time to get that coordination in and that communication structure going. So that's going to at least a year or more to get set up. The other signal was that they did post, and this was what got a lot of attention on social media, for a licensing person focused on NFTs. And they would not have filled that position if they didn't intend to do licensing for a while. So Vivi is a licensing deal. And they never have a person dedicated to a single partner unless it's like a Lego or a Hasbro. So that they have a person dedicated to NFTs. My takeaway is that they're going to do more licensing. They'll probably have multiple licensing partnerships for the foreseeable future, let's say the next 2 years. And then my guess is that Disney will self-publish within the next 2 years. And it might take a little bit longer to build out that Disney magic chain, but the build begins pretty soon.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lifetime, a couple of years in like traditional world, not, but in NFTs it is.
Yeah, 2 years in crypto is, it's forever. 2 years in film world is yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's projects at Disney still in development that I worked on, and this is going back 7 or 8 years ago now, that are still not released yet.
That's
So,
incredible. And they're
so
going to
every
be
year, like,
released?
oh yeah, it's like every year
Yeah.
my filmography grows by like one or two projects. It's like, well, it took them a while, but I worked on that.
That's really wild. They're gonna need to, well, they probably don't need to catch up, but or like speed up. But this space moves so fast. It'll be interesting to see how their existing structures and models work
Yeah,
in the metaverse. Yeah.
yeah. I think
All
they're going
right.
to do
Well,
it though.
thank you. Yeah.
I'm very bullish on Disney in the space.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're enormous. Disney, all of the brands, honestly, if they do it thoughtfully and conscientiously and approach it the right way, it just it's such a great opportunity for them to expand their presence and engage with fans, collectors, everyone
Mhm,
in just a different way that is hopefully win-win-win, which is what
yeah,
this is all about. Yeah.
exactly. Great.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. This was enlightening, and a delight to. I mean, honestly, I could probably chat for 10 hours about all of this with you. But I really appreciate your time and this conversation. It was, and hopefully everyone watching and listening does as well. It was, yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Yes, I'm going to take you up on that. At some point, we'll definitely have you back because yeah, there's never going to be a shortage of things to talk about. I think so.
And
Yeah.
hopefully one of these days, my own project.
Yes.
My first project.
Yeah, yeah, first of many, I'm sure, but yeah,
Yeah.
as soon as you have one, let me know. We will get you on here to talk about it because I would love to know all about it, your approach, how you're approaching it, and all. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be fascinating. Cool.
Sounds good.
All right.
Cool.
Take
Thank you.
care.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for watching. If you watch the whole thing, I'm sure you got tremendous wealth of information out of it because John is just a treasure trove of insightful, valuable content, thoughts, insights. He really has a way of uh, looking at this space from a perspective that we really rarely see, just because there hasn't yet been sort of this adoption of people coming from the traditional world of these huge brands and companies, and really jumping in from a grassroots perspective and sharing such information. We've seen companies begin to enter the space, Nike, Adidas, Coca-Cola, even Disney a little bit, on the VV app. But by and large, it's the companies themselves and not individuals from the companies sort of entering and going, hey, this is what I've learned and I think, and sharing their knowledge. So it was such a tremendous opportunity for me to talk with John, and I hope to have him back on again. If you like the video, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Like it, comment it. Follow John on Twitter. He is constantly posting really insightful things and commentary on the space. And yeah, again, it's for me, this was so much fun and one of my favorite Zen chats. And again, I hope to have him back on again.